This shipment of lettuces has just arrived in the UK. It's being inspected for stowaways, and you can never be sure of what you might find. In a container full of lettuces, the worst enemy would be hungry caterpillars.
I've found 6 or 7 samples so far of green and black caterpillars. Yeah, I've never seen anything like this before. Look, I'm going to hold the shipment and send you a couple of samples by courier. OK, speak to you soon. Bye.
Last caller.
Urgent delivery.
At the Central Science Laboratories near York, entomologists specialise in identifying all kinds of unusual insects. It's a race against the clock to check if the caterpillars are dangerous or not before the shipment of lettuces goes rotten. It might seem strange to make such a fuss over a few creepy crawlies, but size isn't a factor when it comes to destroying harvests. Thousands of pounds worth of damage has been done to potato crops by the tiny Colorado beetle. If this harmful little bug managed to sneak into this country, it could be devastating for our farmers. It's unlikely that these caterpillars could cause that amount of damage, but it's better to be safe than sorry. There needs to be a quick and reliable method for identifying what has been sent.
He's got very distinct black hair bases and longitudinal lines. And the surface of the skin is very, very rough. It's covered in tiny spines.
The first thing is to find out if this is a caterpillar that has been identified before. If it is, the chances are they'll have it kept in their museum for reference. There's a whole range of pests that have been identified, from locusts to giant cockroaches.
These are all the wrong shape and the wrong size. This is better. They don't have the black spots. I think our species is not British.
If the caterpillar isn't British, the next source of information is in jars of preserved insects. Keeping insects preserved is good for helping to identify certain features, like hairs on the skin's surface, but it's not good for checking colour, which quickly fades. For this, nothing beats a photograph. This caterpillar photo fit is one of the clearest ways of matching colours.
That might be it.
Carefully looking for similarities and differences enables scientists to give the furry little intruder an identity. The black markings were the biggest giveaway. It's an old world bollworm. They're a definite pest, but there were only a few in the lorry, so the shipment of lettuces is safe. But when the fate of the nation's harvest is at stake, you can't afford to take any chances, even with these furry little fellas. "2,000 years ago, there were very few scientists, and little was known about the animals and plants which lived on our planet. Aristotle was one of the first people to make a list of all the animals which had been identified. He lived in ancient Greece, along with a pupil of his, Theophrastus, who was a keen botanist. They observed the living world around them. Theophrastus was able to find and name about 500 plants. Aristotle identified about 500 different animals. Like all scientists, they like to be organised. They put things into groups depending on their shape. But theirs wasn't the only system. In China, people decided to group animals and plants depending on whether they were good to eat, bad to eat, or belonged to the emperor. Others grouped plants and animals depending on whether or not they could help cure disease. In New Guinea, animals were grouped according to their habitat. Everything which lived in the sea was called a fish. If it flew in the air, it was called a bird. 400 years ago, as new areas of the world were explored, scientists recorded new varieties of creatures. The number of identified species of animals and plants grew to many thousands. A system was needed to make sense of all this chaos. One idea was simply to put everything in alphabetical order, but then the order would depend on which language you spoke. It took a scientist called John Ray to carry on from where Aristotle left off. By dissecting many plants and animals, he noticed similarities in how their insides were arranged. It was the beginning of the system we use today. Plants are now divided into two major groups, flowering and non-flowering. Animals are divided into vertebrates and invertebrates. The group we belong to, the vertebrates, contains all the animals we know with backbones. But this group has been divided up even further into 5 smaller groups. Birds, fish, amphibians, reptiles, and mammals. There are lots of ways to tell which group an animal belongs to, but one of the main clues is its skin covering.
Oh, he's raw.
Our pet detectives are Luke, Teslin, Caroline, and Donna. And their mission, should they wish to accept it, is to take a close look at the vertebrates in Twycross Zoo. Caroline's in charge.
Right, you two go that way and us two will go that way. Go.
Caroline and Teslin got a chance to hold 2 hand-reared baby chimps, Janet and Danny. So what do chimps feel like?
The hair's fine on top, on the head, and really warm. Feels as if they never get cold.
Yeah.
The eyes are like humans.
But remember, it's the body covering that helps decide what group of animals the chimps belong to. Is it a bird, a fish, a mammal, an amphibian, or a reptile?
It's a mammal because it's got a lot of hair. It's got it's
warm-blooded.
And it's
You can tell by the hair mostly.
Well, Caroline and Teslin seem to have sussed that mammals have hair. But how are Luke and Donna getting on?
Right, this is a Californian king snake. It is a reptile. What I want you to do is hold it. Just both hands out. Don't actually grab a hold of the snake, let it run over your hands. And if wherever it wants to go, it can do.
It's sort of soft, isn't it?
Yeah, it's quite soft.
Sort of smooth. You can feel all the bumps in the scales and everything.
It's quite squidgy.
I'm not squeezing it.
What makes the snake a reptile is its dry and scaly skin.
What are these scales underneath it for?
Right, if you look at the scales and underneath the body here, you'll see they're actually bigger than the rest of the scales on the snake. They use these scales a bit like feet. They're able to open them out a little bit and they're able to pull themselves along the ground with these. Also, if you look at the scales at the top here, they all face the one way. This makes the body nice and smooth, able to go through gaps, able to go along the ground much, much easier. A bit like birds' feathers, always facing the one way.
These giant tortoises look very different to the snake, but take a look at the skin.
Very scaly on its legs and its head.
Yeah.
Which group do tortoises belong to?
This is an amphibian. It's a marine toad. They come from Central and South America. And you can have it there. Check, one hand on top, sit.
Big bulge of fat underneath. Covered by a soft layer of skin. It's a bit damp. And on top it's rough. And
This part's really soft.
Amphibians spend their life both in water and on land. They don't have scales. Instead, their skin is smooth and wet. This animal is easy. It's a bird, a macaw to be even more precise. And this one seems to prefer Donna to Luke.
Put your arm out. He likes your shoulder.
Claws on your neck as well.
Most birds have claws and beaks, but what separates them from all the other animals is their feathers.
Oh my lord, it's slowing down.
Feels like it's loads of fat in there.
Just like reptiles, fish are covered in scales.
All the scales are coming off on there.
The thing about fish scales is that they're loose, and instead of being dry, they feel slimy. It isn't always so obvious which group an animal belongs to. What about these freshwater seals?
It's got fur.
This must be a mammal, but it looks like a fish as well.
I know.
Don't be put off by where it lives. Remember, the clue is always in the skin covering. Knowing which group an animal belongs to is one thing, being able to give it a specific name is another. But no matter how complicated the animal is, it can usually be identified by answering a few simple questions.
Hi and welcome to Weird Stuff, the quiz show which tries to identify some of the weirdest animals in the world. And our top team of animal detectives today are...
Danielle, Josh, Laura.
Right, now your task is to take a picture from here of a strange and unusual animal to the real animal which is located somewhere out there in the maze. Now, you've got to answer some very simple questions here. Well, they would be simple if the animals weren't quite so weird. And you've only got 90 seconds in which to do this, so are you ready?
Yeah.
Right, Danielle, you're first up, let's go! Right, does it have eyes or no eyes?
Eyes, definitely.
Okay. Hair or no hair? Hair or no hair?
It's spiky.
You're gonna have to make a decision. Come on, Danielle. Hair. Well done. Right, Joshua, off you go. Eyes or no eyes?
No eyes.
No eyes. Well done. Quick answer. Next one. Here we are. Segments or no segments?
What's a segment?
Come on, Josh. Segments or no segments? No segments. Right. Down to tentacles or no tentacles?
No tentacles.
No tentacles. Put your picture down. Laura, off you go. Right. Eyes or no eyes?
Eyes.
Eyes. Right. Hair or no hair? Come on, you're going to have to be quick here. No hair. Down here. Scales or no scales? Scales or
no scales.
No scales, right. And finally, gills or no gills?
Come
on,
I don't know.
have a look at the picture, come on. Gills. Right, put your picture down. Right, Danielle. Eyes or no eyes?
No eyes.
No eyes. Right. Segments or no segments?
Can't see any.
Come on, segments.
No segments.
No segments. Right, your last one. Tentacles or no tentacles?
Definitely tentacles.
Definitely tentacles, very sure. Right, Joshua, off you go. Does it have eyes or no? Oh. Well, hard lines. Josh is not going to get another question, so let's have a look at how you got on. Now, they said this animal had hair and eyes. Well, it's called an echidna. It's a spiny anteater. Now, what makes this animal so weird is it's a mammal which actually lays eggs, which is very unusual indeed. Now, it's covered with a mixture of hair and spine, so very well done to you indeed. And any Sonic the Hedgehog fans will recognise the echidna as one of Sonic's best friends. Now, they said this weird creature had eyes, no hair, no scales, but it did have gills. And they were absolutely right, because this little chap is called an axolotl. It's a bit like a tadpole. It's a baby newt, if you like, which has never grown up. And what a good guess that those frilly red things at the side of its head were gills, which is how they breathe. They decided this little fella had no eyes, no segments and no tentacles. Well, were they right? I'm afraid they were wrong, because if they'd have chosen segments, it would have brought them to these little fellas here, where they would have been able to identify these mystery creatures as the squirmy, wormy ragworms. Now, each of these bodily parts, this is horrible, are like little segments, rather like the segments on earthworms. Ugh. And finally, they said this thing had no eyes, no segments, but it did have tentacles. Well, were they right? Well, yes, they were, because it's called a sea cucumber. But I don't recommend you try and eat it, because it's not a plant, it's an animal. It's a close relative of the starfish. Well, you got 3 correct, and if only you'd have got 4, you'd have won today's Star Prize, which was an all-expenses paid trip for you and your friends to Disneyland. Oh. But you didn't, so you don't. Wave goodbye. Goodbye!
Being able to identify plants can sometimes be a matter of life and death.
This is boring anyway. Let's do something else.
Philip, I dare you to eat one of these. What is it? We've eaten one.
No, we haven't.
Yes, we have. And is it all right? Can you eat it?
I dare you. We didn't have one.
Shut up. All right, then I will.
Hello, I'm one of the doctors here in Casualty. What's your name?
Philip.
Now then, Philip, you're not looking very well. What's been happening with you?
I feel sick and I feel really dizzy.
Right.
Everything's blurred and my head really hurts now.
Although most plants are harmless, a surprising number of leaves and berries can be poisonous. Anyone who thinks they've eaten something toxic should a doctor.
Okay. Could I have a look at those, please? Now, I'll just take these round to our computer around the corner, and we'll try and work out exactly what it is that he's eaten.
To make an accurate diagnosis, the plant must be identified. Doctors are turning to a specially designed CD-ROM. Because they aren't plant experts, this is an essential tool for identification.
Colour of seed. The seed's brown.
It's a computerised key. To identify the plant, they need to answer a few simple questions. The CD-ROM narrows down the number of possible suspects.
Well, that looks like laburnum.
So the CD-ROM has found the right plants. But are laburnum seeds toxic? It looks like the boy got to the doctors just in time. Laburnum is definitely poisonous, but with plenty of fluids and rest, he should be fine. Being able to identify plants using simple keys like this means doctors can help treat patients quickly and help save lives.